If I showed you three faces and three names, could you pick the one that looks like a Vanessa? Picture a crowded elevator where everyone wears a conference badge. You glance at a face, you glance at the badge, and something in you relaxes like a puzzle piece clicked into place. Now, flip the moment. Pretend the badges are turned around and you have to guess the names first. You might laugh, but your brain will still start making bets because it hates leaving patterns unused. That tiny click matters in places where the stakes are real. Names show up before people do, on resumes, on dating profiles, on class rosters, on appointment lists. A name can tilt expectations before a voice is heard, and expectations shape how we behave towards someone. Over time, treatment becomes habit, and habit becomes identity. By the end of this story, you will understand why a name can act like a stamp pressed onto appearance, how that stamp deepens with repetition, and how to catch it before it decides for you. Try a quick thought experiment. Pick a name you have not heard lately, something like Caleb or Vanessa, and let your mind invent a face before you attach it to a real person. Most people do not picture a blank oval. They picture a haircut, a smile style, and a general vibe, like the face arrives with a mood. That is your brain building a shortcut from scraps of memory. Psychologists have tested this shortcut in lab tasks that are almost comically simple. Participants see photos of strangers and try to match each face to a name from a short list. Across multiple experiments, people tend to do a little better than pure chance. The effect is not huge and it does not work for every name, but it shows up often enough to be uncomfortable. One clue to what drives it is cultural fit. When the names and faces come from the same culture, matching tends to improve. When the names feel unfamiliar, the edge often fades. Here's the stamp in plain terms. A name is a social label, and labels come with expectations that can be warm, unfair, or simply inaccurate. Those expectations change what you notice in the first seconds, and the first seconds are where people decide who seems friendly, competent, or out of place. Now for a twist that sounds silly until you picture it clearly. In some studies, people could still match names even when they barely saw the face. They were mostly looking at hair and outline, and they still did better than luck. Hair does not contain secret letters, but it is a choice, and choices are where stereotypes leave fingerprints. If a culture has a vague sense of what a Vanessa looks like, people named Vanessa may drift towards similar styling because those options get rewarded, and because standing out sometimes feels costly. You can feel how fast your mind makes those options. Think of a name that feels sharp and clipped, then think of a name that feels soft and flowing. Notice whether the face in your mind changes its eyebrows, its mouth, even its posture. Many people feel their own jaw tighten or relax as they imagine it. Sound becomes shaped so quickly that your muscles start to play along. So far, it sounds like the stamp is on the observer, projecting a story onto an innocent face. But then comes the Dorian Gray idea, and it shifts the story from perception to appearance. In Oscar Wilde's novel, a portrait absorbs the wear and tear of a man's life. Psychologists use the phrase Dorian Gray effect to talk about a quieter version of that suspicion, that inner habits can leak outward and gradually show up in a face. The mechanism is simple. Your face is moved by muscles, and you practice some movements more than others. Over years, repetition can shape the resting tension of those muscles and leave patterns in skin, the same way a favorite chair develops a groove. Now add the name stamp to that. If people treat you as warm because your name sounds warm, you may learn to smile earlier in introductions. If people treat you as strict because your name sounds strict, you may learn to keep your face tighter around strangers. None of this has to start as truth. It can start as a social nudge, and nudges repeated become defaults. Imagine a young woman starting her first job in a busy clinic. Her badge says Grace in bold letters. On day one, an older patient reads it and says she must be patient. Grace wants the interaction to go well, so she softens her voice and offers a calmer smile. Later, a coworker jokes that Grace is always so gentle, and Grace leans into it because it keeps the day smooth. Months pass, and she notices that gentleness arrives on her face even before she chooses it, because it has become the easiest way to be understood. There is a tempting loophole. Maybe parents pick names that already fit the baby. If that were the main driver, children should look like their names as strongly as adults do. But studies that compare children and adults tend to find a stronger match in adults. That pattern fits the stamp story because adults have had years of feedback, grooming habits, and learned expression to accumulate. Then comes the machine twist. Computer vision systems trained on huge collections of labeled photos can sometimes guess a person's name better than chance, too. That does not mean the machine has discovered the essence of Vanessa. It usually means the machine has found tiny visual patterns that correlate with naming trends, grooming, and photo styles. A computer can notice the fingerprints of a culture even when it has no idea what culture means. All of this sits inside a broader truth about facial aesthetics, because humans constantly read character from faces. We make snap judgments about friendliness, competence, and trust within moments. Research suggests those judgments can be fairly consistent across observers, even though they can be wrong and biased. A name adds another layer of suggestion on top of the face, like stamp ink smearing the picture before you focus. If you want a second interactive moment, use it the next time you meet someone new. When you hear their name, pause for half a breath and notice what your mind tries to paste onto their face. Does the name make you expect humor, softness, toughness, seriousness? The instant you catch the expectation, it loses some grip, and you can choose curiosity instead. There is also a practical reason to care. If you evaluate people, hiring, teaching, coaching, or even just introducing friends, your expectations can become a self-fulfilling prophecy. When you assume someone will be confident, you often give them more room to be confident. When you assume someone will be difficult, you tighten up, and tension can pull the worst out of an interaction. The stamp is not just on the face because the stamp is in the room with both of you. And if the stamp feels personal, there is a hopeful angle. If part of the match develops through controllable choices and repeated expressions, then it is also editable. You can decide that your name does not get to choose your haircut, your tone, or your resting face. You can practice expressions that match who you actually are, not what a stereotype requests, until that becomes your default. So go back to the elevator with the badges. That click you feel, the sense that the name fits the face, feels like insight. Often it is just your brain recognizing the imprint of a stamp that society has been pressing for years. Once you can see the stamp, you can stop confusing it with destiny. Because the real Dorian Gray lesson is not that your face betrays you. The lesson is that your face is a living diary, and you are allowed to write in it on purpose.